The room felt colder than usual, the faint hum of the hospital machines the only sound that seemed to fill the silence. I could barely keep my eyes open, groggy from the medication they had given me after my surgery. The last thing I expected was to see James walk into the room. He wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, her face unfamiliar. A sharp pang of unease struck me, but I couldn't place why. His expression, smug and self-assured, made my stomach twist. "Are you okay, Mary?" he asked, almost in a mockingly sympathetic tone, his eyes scanning the sterile room. He clearly wasn't concerned about me, just the situation. "I'm sure you don't need to worry about anything while you're here. I'll handle things at home for now." I glanced at the woman beside him, her presence making me uncomfortable. She wore a confident smile, as if she had already claimed her place in my life. I barely had the strength to lift my head from the pillow, but the thought that crossed my mind was clear. James didn't know it yet, but I had something far more valuable than his careless attitude could ever take from me. "Who's she?" I asked weakly, barely managing a whisper. James looked at me with a raised eyebrow, then casually put his arm around her. "This is Amanda. I met her at work. She's been a great help to me, especially lately." His words stung more than I expected, but I didn't let him see it. I could feel a quiet sense of rage building inside me. All these years of being the dutiful wife, of caring for his every need, and he'd already moved on. I should have been devastated, but I wasn't. Instead, I felt a quiet resolve that had been missing for far too long. I'd spent my entire life taking care of others, James, the house, and his never-ending failures. But now, something had changed. Something inside me had shifted during the long days of my recovery. Something that made me feel stronger than I had in years. James leaned in, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're in no condition to deal with anything right now, Mary. Don't worry about the house or any of that. I've already talked to Amanda. We'll figure it out." My blood boiled, but I managed to smile, knowing that this moment was coming, the moment that would change everything. "If you say so, James," I replied calmly, reaching for the papers I had hidden under my pillow. The divorce papers. I had kept them prepared for months, ever since I had finally realized I deserved more than this life with him. I handed them to him without hesitation. James took the papers, not fully grasping what was happening. His smug grin widened as he glanced at them. "What's this? You want a divorce? After all I've done for you?" I didn't flinch. "Yes, that's exactly what I want." His face turned pale, but only for a moment. The anger came next, sharp and quick. "You can't be serious. You think you'll be better off without me?" "Maybe," I said quietly, watching as he processed the words. "Maybe I'll be better off on my own." He looked down at Amanda, who gave me a cold smile, clearly relishing the moment. "Well, you don't have to worry about me. I'll be much happier with Amanda. I don't need someone who can't even take care of herself." With that, they left, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence of the room settled over me once again. But this time, it wasn't the oppressive silence of despair. It was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, calm and cleansing. I let out a soft laugh, though I couldn't help the tears that began to well up. It was Friday, and by Monday, the divorce would be finalized. In just 3 days, I would be free. My name is Laura Daniels. I'm 48 years old, and for the last 20 years, I've been a wife, a mother, and a caretaker. I never asked for much in life, just a peaceful home and someone to share it with. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I had married Paul, my college sweetheart, right out of school. We were both from small towns and, like many young couples, We moved to the city to build a life together. Paul had always been charming and easygoing, the kind of man who could make friends easily and had big dreams. I supported him through every job change, every career setback, and every move we made. I was the one who held things together. I cooked, cleaned, and made sure our home was a place of comfort for him. And in the beginning, that was enough. But as the years passed, Paul's attitude shifted. He became distant, critical, and controlling. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Our marriage began to unravel slowly, like a thread being pulled from the fabric of our life. We never had children, which I initially thought would bring us closer, but instead, it created a distance between us. The emptiness that had started as a quiet hum in the background of my life became louder with each passing year. But I stayed, hoping things would improve, hoping that Paul would wake up and realize how much I had sacrificed for him. Then, a few months ago, everything changed. I received a call from my mother about a family inheritance. A piece of land, passed down from my grandparents, was worth $10 million. It was unexpected, and to be honest, it felt like something out of a dream. The land had been appraised, and my mother had transferred it into my name to avoid inheritance taxes. I had always been the quiet one in the family, content with my modest life, but now, this windfall presented me with a new reality. When I told Paul about the inheritance, he didn't seem happy. In fact, he seemed almost angry, as if I had somehow betrayed him by keeping the news to myself. He became more controlling, and his attitude worsened. He started criticizing everything I did, even the smallest things. But what really set off the chain of events was when he came home early one afternoon and announced he had quit his job. Again. I was furious, but I didn't show it. I had learned long ago that any reaction would just make things worse. But the thought of him quitting again, after all the times I had supported him through job changes, was the breaking point. Something inside me snapped. I realized I didn't want to live like this anymore. I didn't want to be controlled, to live in fear of his temper. The thought of divorce, which had once seemed impossible, was now my only option. I quietly began preparing for the inevitable. I filed the divorce papers and kept them hidden in the back of my closet. I started thinking about what my life would look like without Paul. I had no idea where to start, but I knew that I couldn't stay in this toxic relationship anymore. The days dragged on until one fateful afternoon, I found myself in the hospital after a car accident. I wasn't seriously injured, but the doctors insisted I stay for observation. It wasn't the worst thing to happen to me, but it felt like the universe was pushing me into the next phase of my life. I thought about the divorce papers in my bag, and I knew that the time had come. Paul's reaction to my hospitalization was everything I had feared. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask about my health. Instead, he asked, "Who's going to cook for me while you're in the hospital?" His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I was no longer the woman who would cater to his every whim. I was someone else now. A new version of myself. One who would not tolerate his neglect, his selfishness, his disregard for my well-being. I had the divorce papers in my bag, and I was ready to take the first step toward freedom. When he came to the hospital, I handed him the papers. I watched as his face went from smug satisfaction to confusion, then anger. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" He spat. "You think you'll be better off without me?" I looked at him calmly, knowing what was coming next. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I will be." Paul's temper flared, but I didn't back down. I had spent too many years putting up with his behavior, sacrificing my happiness for a man who couldn't even care for me when I was in need. I was done. He left the hospital with his new woman, Amanda, and I was left alone to contemplate what came next. The divorce would be finalized soon. By Monday, I would be free. The next few days were quiet, and I spent them reflecting on the choices I had made. I had always been the caretaker, the one who put everyone else first. But now, I was finally putting myself first. And it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Monday came, and I received a call from Paul. He was furious. "You didn't sign the papers?" he shouted. "What's going on?" I chuckled to myself. "Oh, I did. I just didn't file them yet," I said, savoring the moment. "But don't worry, I will. It's just a matter of time." And with that, I hung up the phone, finally free to begin my new life.